your perspective, Andrew, what does great equity and inclusion look like?
It's a very deep question because there's a lot around that. And my starting point has to effectively be the consumer, our customer. And then I work up and say, what does it mean to our dealer network and how our brand is represented, NMGB, and then also Nissan globally.
Yes.
So what can we feed up as well as down, and making sure it resonates and that customers actually can experience and see it. So for us, it's really about recognizing how rich and diverse our own customer base is and making them feel at home with our brand, and that we're authentic within our skin, as you were saying earlier, in terms of what we're trying to deliver. And I think, alluding to what you said earlier, clearly there's a business case that supports that. But for me, that has to be a secondary component. Yeah. It really is around doing what's right for the business, but also representative of our customer base.
In terms of how that might look within the enterprise as a whole, and obviously you've spoken well about thinking about your customer base and the diversity and diverse nature of that. But in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion within the enterprise, what does that feel like to you in terms of your ideal?
Everybody, irrespective of any sort of framing,
yes,
feels comfortable and at peace with their space within the organisation. That they feel that they can contribute and add value without restrictions, without any sort of inhibitions, and just be themselves. And to me, it's almost too obvious to mention.
Yes.
Yeah, because the value to the team is so significant in terms of getting that intellectual perspective from such a wide audience that's diverse.
Yes. And I remember, again, the starting point 3 years ago was that you said, I want to build a successful, flourishing enterprise. But I know that to do that, not everyone needs to look like me.
Mm. And I think, I've got perfect life experiences with this. When we talk across many spectrums, yes, where work I've done with Autistic Foundation, Autistic Trust, where you're saying, well, hang on, if we want to move from mediocrity to excellence, and we want to deliver at the highest level, what you need is really clear policies and procedures in your organization to make sure that you're not in a recruitment process where you're recruiting and defaulting to the standard where there's a subconscious bias because, oh, you went to the same school? Oh, you're into rugby? Oh, team dynamic is perfect. Yeah. This will work. This person will absolutely fit. Well, actually what I want the genius in the IT, in the finance, in the specific role. And that person may be very different and much more challenging to manage in terms of team dynamics.
They might not even like rugby.
Exactly, absolutely. And they may absolutely not be, somebody that's, even would have been considered in a normal recruitment process. So what are we doing in terms of policies and procedures to make sure that we really are inclusive?
Okay.
In processes and policies within the organization and making sure we avoid subconscious bias, because actually the value add comes from bringing the best people for the specific job, not necessarily
I hear you.
The person who you have the most chemistry necessarily with.
In terms of the kind of diversity, equity and inclusion that we've been discussing, both within the enterprise, but also Nissan being a custodian of those qualities and taking it out into the wider society, would you mind sharing with us a little bit about the Possibilities Project and how that works and what it means again to you and to the organisation?
With pleasure. I think the Possibilities Project was an initiative which, in its embryonic stage, we weren't sure how we were going to develop it. But what was very clear to us is that we needed to be credible and we wanted to be authentic in what our objective was. So for us, if you look at our underlying ethos as an organization, we talk about zero emissions, zero fatalities, zero inequality. And I was saying, well, what does this really mean?
Okay.
And how does that translate through the organization? And does a customer even see this? Does a consumer actually, where's the evidence of this? In our communication, in our advertising, in our DNA, in the showrooms, within employees. So for me, it was really important that we look at what are the key deliverables and what is actually the perception of the market and consumers and employees. And we did our global employee surveys. We got lots of feedback from employees to understand what was important to them. And then we came up with this whole possibilities project, which was really around how do we focus on LGBTQ plus community, our disability inclusion, and really looking at areas where we can make a real positive change. And some of these things were around activities that we did with providing prosthetics, for example.
And it's incredible.
Through Richard Whitehead Foundation, which is amazing. A fantastic athlete, has a fantastic exposure in the market. And we were saying, well, actually, how can we support him to make a difference with the work that he's already doing, and look at, from a brand point of view, where are the synergies? Because to me, this is not a marketing exercise.
Yes.
This is about changing the dynamic and the culture of the business. Running for us was, for example, one of the most easily accessible sports.
Yes.
So as a result of that, we thought, well, let's work on that dynamic. Let's link what we're doing with LGBTQ plus community. Let's link that with what we're doing with Richard Whitehead and the great, formidable work that he's doing, and see how we can sponsor and get more involved with these big events like the London Marathon, the Great North Marathons, and all of these runs that we're involved in. So I think these are key deliverables that I think have been well received by employees. Well received by the dealer network. I mean, we've raised money here. We've got a significant number of our employees have been involved in the activities and running events. And of course, we've had the opportunity to have, people like yourself and also Richard talk to employees and engage with the organization. Yes. So that employees understand that we're also authentic and sincere in what we're trying to deliver.
Definitely. I think what's also very interesting from an LGBT plus perspective is that you had, for example, at the London Marathon, an LGBT cheer zone,
yeah,
and were involved with the Rainbow Row.
Correct.
And so for the community to be able to see an organisation such as yours that are not only truly supportive of the community, but are doing it in such a demonstrable, visible way, where you're enhancing the quality of life of the community, I mean, really matters. It means something.
And I think what's important there is how much amazing feedback we've had from such a wide range of people, be that customers, be that just the general public,
Brilliant.
Non-Nissan customers, so to speak,
Yeah.
but have actually recognized that and said, wow, that's really special. And, Adele, who supports that, I mean, she's
Adele Roberts.
Adele Roberts is amazing. And, hat off to Adele. She's an incredible inspiration and motivator, even for me personally. And I think she's done really great work to support us there as well, along with yourselves, obviously.
Thank you.
But I think, we've got really positive feedback.
That's great to hear.
And I think, it's good because, again, for us, it's about, putting out there what we think is just the right thing to do.
It's interesting to me because, again, when we first started speaking, I said often doing the right thing brings results and rewards that we don't necessarily plan for. But if you do the right thing often enough, your brand actually does resonate in the right way, and there will be commercial benefit, albeit I know that wasn't why, of course.
Well, I can honestly tell you, to this day, we do not have a KPI and we do not have a measure on how many cars we've sold as a result of any of this. What I have is a feel-good factor from the emails and the communication we get back from customers, public, employees on
Amazing.
how they were inspired by it. That's the KPI. I've no idea whether we've sold one car or 500 cars as a result. I've no idea, and nor do we measure that.
No, absolutely. If I may ask, Andrew, what is it that most resonates with you about Pride 365, and how did that, or does that, of course, fit into your kind of wider DE&I agenda?
The partnership for me with Pride 365, the most important component of that is that it really underpins everything we're doing in this space.
Yes.
And for me, it shows our commitment and supports our commitment towards LGBTQ plus community. But the most important thing for me is it's not a day, a week, a month, or seasonality. It's part of the culture. It's year on, and it's going to be part of the DNA of the organization. And that's what's really important for me, that we don't just celebrate a day or a week or a month. This has to be part of what we do, and I think that's what LGBTQ plus community is giving us through Pride 365. I think that and there's the whole audit concept. It's,
of course.
You keep us in check. It's a soundboard to say, are we up to speed? Are we doing the right things? Are we missing anything? So for me, you've been really instrumental in helping us set up those core pillars.
Thank you.
Within what we're trying to achieve in the organisation.
Well, if I can say, I mean, Nissan have been a delight to work with, and your team have been incredibly not just positive in fulfilling your vision of where you wanted the partnership to be, but also making sure that every month we meet religiously and we talk about what have we achieved this month, what are we going to achieve next month, and making sure that it is part of the DNA of the organisation. So we mentioned the Great North series and how the LGBT zone worked, but it's also things like building ally networks, which we've been helpful in doing. So I just think that for me, and saying this from a Pride 365 perspective, that you've been ideal partners, because you say keep you in check, but it's been much more a genuine partnership where we support you and, as you say, underpin much of your activity, but we know that we're knocking at an open door, and that's great.
And to me, what's important though is that you have the dialogue, that as close as we think we are to this space, we need to be closer, and that is what you can deliver us.
Yes.
So are there tweaks and adjustments that need to be made? Are there sensitivities we need to be aware of?
Of course.
And that for me is really valuable, because we don't want to go down a specific trajectory and end up finding, hang on, the North Star has shifted. And for me, that's really important, because it's such a sensitive and emotive area.
Yes.
And, you just need to get it right. And for me, language is critical.
Yes.
And it's one of the biggest blockers in this space.
Well, it is, and also because communication is critical, and what matters most, and in fact, many of the conversations we've been having with your team, is the importance of dialogue between people from the community, allies, and others. Why? Because if people are fearful about talking, what happens is that prejudice becomes entrenched. What needs to happen is, if you have dialogue, even if sometimes you say the wrong thing, as long as it's with the right spirit and the right intent, that's okay.
The challenge you have is it stops a lot of people engaging in dialogue. Okay. And that's why we have to create the platform that allows that flexibility and agility. And that's what I embrace. Because
absolutely.
You would rather allow an audience to engage rather than be apprehensive to engage. So for me, it's all about that learning process. And one of the biggest things I'm proud of within all of what we're doing is our ability to try and cascade our learnings to other entities within the UK and Europe and the wider audience, which is the platform where we are working on, are we doing the right things? If they're working, are these best practice entities and opportunities that we can share?
Yes.
and pass these back through the organisation and to our other business colleagues, which for me is really something we can be very proud of. And I thank you for all your support in helping us drive that.
I think the final point I would like to make is that in the UK alone, there are 5 million adults that identify as LGBT+, and it's estimated that by 2030 that it will be up to 19% of the population. And so actually getting it right, using your words earlier, is mission critical, not just as a business, but also just for us to have a truly inclusive society. So I'd like to thank you very, very much for meeting us, indeed for the partnership, and we look forward to working with you for many years to come.
No, thank you very much, and thank you for your support.
All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.